So, in case you've been living under a rock for the past 3 days, 3 days it will be now, Shin Ultraman came out in the US and the UK for some godforsaken voodoo magic somehow conjured it into being over here. Which, hey, I'm thankful for that at least. But yeah, the movie was pretty good. I think everyone would agree. Well, I don't think everyone would agree, but I'll get into that at some point soon. But before we begin talking, I have two very spectacular guests who you may have heard. Please introduce yourselves, good gentlemen.
Hi, it's Liquid Pasta here, returning again, like for that is every once in 3 years. And yeah, I enjoyed this film quite a bit. And I saw it with the fellow Rios down here, and I have quite a few good takes on it. So yeah, I can't wait to share it.
And I am GPTV. You may also know me as Godzilla Productions TV, but I dumbed down the name. And I saw it and I loved it. I do have maybe one or two controversial takes on it, but overall, I thought the movie was pretty good.
All right, cool. Welcome to the show, lads. I think this is GPTV's first time on my username patented trading podcast review channel show thing. So welcome aboard on your first venture into this also dangerous land.
Thank you.
Now, just to get things started, obviously, how normal people would do something like this is talk about our overall thoughts on the film and why it was so good. I shall begin by saying that the film very much came across as a by fans for the fans kind of movie, and as a fan, a very, very big fan, in fact, it met almost all of my expectations. It brought back the original series in a very interesting way while still remaining faithful. The structure threw me off a little bit at first with its, obviously it's taken a very episodic approach, but I did come to like it upon reflection. There was a couple little niggles in terms of things that didn't quite work out so good in my eyes, but as an overall product, definitely something I'll be rewatching again multiple times over.
Right.
Yeah,
honestly,
me myself. Sorry, you go.
I was just gonna say
Okay.
I'm pretty much the same overall. It was very. Yeah, I really liked the episodic feel. Honestly, looking back, I feel like that was probably the best approach to it. Because, I mean, with Ultraman, there's just when you're making a movie, especially like not recreating, but like paying such a homage to the original show. Like it's supposed to be the original show, the movie. It's kind of hard to like fit all that 39 episodes into one, less than 2 hour movie. So I think ultimately, the episodic route of the movie was the best way to go.
Yeah, before I start, obviously, I assume this is a spoiler review.
Yeah, go all out. We're just assuming people have seen the film.
Yeah. I mean, I walked in like expecting to like it because when the trailers first came out, I wasn't too sure what to think with the whole like CGI recreation, but I was willing to trust Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi. I absolutely loved Shin Godzilla, and I absolutely loved it, even though it had like a much faster pace than I was expecting. I guess in order to fit in all 5 episodes like coherently into one film, I think it did it really well, and it managed to be its own unique film and have its own identity, even though it pays so much homage and love to the original show. And I love how they modernized the villains like Mephiles and Zarab, and how the fight scenes they were so like they're absolutely like cinematically amazing, even though they still sort of felt like fights from the classic show with a bit of motion capture. And yeah, the characters were good, and it was just an absolute joy to watch.
Right. Yeah, the fights, the cinematography in those were just so amazing. Especially Sarah Mephiles, just Well, all of them really, but Zerub, that one just felt really special, like flying around with them. That
Yeah,
was
the flying scenes was amazing. Yeah,
and
I've
also
absolutely loved.
I
Yo,
was gonna say the way they you said the way they updated everything. I think yeah, modernizing the way Zerub was modernized was really cool. I like
yeah,
how he set up the cameras to leak Ultraman's identity. That was cool. And like how he
yeah,
controlled computers. That was a yeah, just little things like that were cool.
yeah, yeah. I obviously had to like update it to like use the phone translation, of course, rather than looking around a massive radio. But I
Right.
liked how
That
they
was fun.
modernized. Yeah, I liked how they modernized him by. I think he was the most kind of copied and pasted design, but even then they made it like a lot more interesting by making him like a kind of like a hollowed out half instead of like I don't
Right.
know like a fully formed body. I wasn't too sure what to think about that at first, but then I realized that yeah, that helps make add into the whole creepy surrealism of him, I guess.
And seeing
And
it
oh,
in action,
yeah,
so good.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I absolutely loved how some parts of the film. I'm not sure exactly how many examples there are of this, if there are any that I missed, but how they would just like fully recreate really specific tiny moments from the original show, such as like when like Hayata from the original like Zarab unexpectedly like grasps his hand while he's trying to work the ship, and it has that like sound effect, and they
Yes.
completely recreated that like one to one with this in this film as well. And also when he in the fight scene with Ultraman and Zarab, like they actually fully recreated the actual suit acted movements like, from the original, like how they would like clasp hands and that, like literally just doing a full recreation. I fucking like had a huge grin on my face throughout that whole fight scene. That was so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did notice your enormous smile when we watched the film together throughout pretty much the entire runtime.
Yeah. But yeah, honestly, I think even though I liked Zarab, I'd have to say the fight with Gabora was the most visually pleasing, and it that truly felt more like a Toku fight to me. Like it felt,
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one's probably tied for my favorite was Zerub. That one
yeah,
was so good.
yeah, yeah. So weird. It felt like it still had the sort of heaviness of suit acting while still being like slick enough for like and
Right.
using the CGI as best as it could for like a proper modernization. It was cool.
Yeah.
We were talking,
Yeah,
you were saying just then about the whole idea of them taking aspects of the original, smaller elements or larger, and bringing them back and giving them an updated sort of presence. But what were yours favourite kind of, not necessarily homage, but favourite kind of updating of a particular character or a particular moment in terms of design, the story surrounding them?
I think mine is probably like it's a lot bigger of a change, but it's still like an obvious homage with Ultraman dying and then the humans having to help take out Zeton. In the original Ultraman, Ultraman dies and Zeton just does it. It's Zeton just or the humans just kill Zeton. But in this, instead of the humans like directly doing it, they're the ones who like figure out the plan for Ultraman to kill Zeton. I thought that was a really good update.
yeah. I do like how instead of just making him a random alien, a part of an alien plot, they actually sort of had him tie into M78 as like actually something used to add to the kind of like more morally grey aspects of the ultras in this film, with how like they used to like neutralize planets that could potentially be like harmful to the state of the universe. I liked how they made that part of Zeton's like like new sort of like identity. Yeah, I thought it made for a pretty good finale. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of that, the trillion degree fireball. I like how they actually make it a
Yeah.
trillion degree fireball instead of just a fireball.
Yeah. Yeah, I could fully. I love how they actually went back to that detail and actually like expanded on it. Yeah, that was cool.
I think
But yeah,
I think
I do like.
my favourite like sort of updated thing in regards to this was the greater explanation given to things like
Yeah.
why Ultraman runs out of energy on Earth instead of just it's because the atmosphere. It's yes, it's because the atmosphere, but also because you're maintaining a bond with a human, and also because blah 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 blah, and also because this. but just that entire
Right.
expansion
There's so many factors.
to the quote-unquote beta system as it was, and realistically, if something like that would happen today, then yeah, it would be attempted to be weaponized, and having Mephiles as the facilitator of that was a very cool expansion on that character, even if it isn't exactly related to the character's origin episode.
Yeah. I'm not 100% on like, I haven't fully made my mind up as to what I think about Mephiles in the movie yet, but I thought because he was definitely the alien with the most personal grudge against Ultraman in the original show. I like how they actually made that like front and center with like the rivalry, and how they made him the one to be able to like disguise as a human as opposed to Zarab, to get a more personal feeling kind of rivalry in the human forms, but also how like they made it him who was the one to reveal the whole kind of like in depth of the kind of beta technology, and the one who actually like he was the one to discover like Ultraman's weakness. And yeah, I like, even though it was still in the short kind of like 1 in 5 episode runtime, it made it a lot more memorable, like with the two's rivalry. Yeah.
I like that it was kind of the Mephiles part was kind of the largest section of the movie, I'd say.
Mhm.
Like I was really looking through. I have the movie on my computer by certain means, and I was looking through it in my editing software, and I was very clear that the Mephiles part was just the longest part, looking at the timeline. And I really like that they made that such like a bigger part of the movie, because it felt like probably the most interesting story in it.
Yeah. I like how like
There we go.
like, just like with the political sort of themes, like I was a bit like skeptical going in, because I thought Shin Godzilla really worked as like a political sort of sort of film, with how like the politicians took up most of it to make it do a modernization of the frantic like political turmoil in the original. But I was a bit concerned about would they do the same for Ultraman. But I'm glad that most of the kind of like political turmoil in this film is actually mostly a real kind of nice retelling of the aliens' sort of manipulation of them with Zarab and Mephiles' character. So even though, there's obviously still some of the similar sort of Shin Godzilla like political drama, like it actually helps develop Zarab and Mephiles' characters as well. So yeah.
Right.
I don't know about yous, but I was always slightly disappointed in the fact Shin Bolton wasn't going to be a thing.
It actually never really bothered me, but it kind of did. I was still a little disappointed, but it never really got to me. But hearing the explanation on why it wasn't in the movie, it definitely brings like full closure.
You can tell me how I've become completely decultured to Ultraman. I actually had no idea Bolton was supposed to be in this film. What?
No, he wasn't. But the reason that he wasn't ever like planned for it is because he was more like a sympathetic character in Ultraman, because like the issues with the planet, and they said they just wanted to make all the aliens and villains in the movie just pure evil, rather than just having them sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! Wait, sorry. I thought I had Bolton, not Bolton. Oh, sorry. I thought that'd be a weird pick for an enemy in an Ultraman film. But I think, given like I've heard like from Cedric's told me there's going to be like 3 sort of films in the supposed trilogy, so I guess Bolton would definitely work second. Yeah.
There's going to be a sequel, and then Shin Ultra 7. I'm not sure. I'm not sure with the sequel if it's going to be just more of this, what we got here for the original Ultraman, or if it's supposed to be like the original concept for Returning Ultraman.
Yeah, I'd be perfectly happy with them doing the 5-episode structure again, but I think especially with how they treated this film, I think it'd be great to like make Bolton take up like a greater proportion of the film, given there's 2 episodes dedicated to him in the original show, and I'd basically maybe add more into like the kind of like morally gray situation as to like the billions of Boltons who want to migrate to Earth, and like maybe like do we destroy them or not? Is that genocide or not? But maybe create some more like sympathy to them.
It'd be
Yeah.
like a perfect step up from Shin Ultraman
Mm.
because again with Shin Ultraman it's all evil. We got to stop the bad guy, and obviously it's kind of hard to top a giant thing in space that's going to blow up the whole universe. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
having it more be about a moral dilemma rather than like we got to save everybody dilemma would definitely like make it so there's still stakes and stuff like that, and not
Yeah.
feel like you're just watching the same thing again.
Yeah. Oh, especially like if Ultra 7 is the third one, I think Bolton being in the second one, like giving like a more kind of like focus on like miscommunications with other kinds, and like more like kind of with Bolton being more morally grey in and having potential rather than just a straight up evil like Mephiles and Zarab in this film. That kind of like concept with aliens that would actually help set up Shin Ultra 7, given that Ultra 7 show is pretty much like a load of the episodes of that show are dedicated to like morally grey communications with aliens. So yeah, that would work.
I can't wait for Shin Alien Spell, guys. That's gonna be awesome.
Oh yeah, Shin Onion, absolutely.
No, please. But moving, back into films that are actually out and you can watch right now. In terms of, just to shift focus a little bit onto aspects like the human characters, the human cast, I think it's fair to say, were inferior to the original SSSP, but that's something you can't really expect considering the vastly different amounts of runtime. But in terms of what we did get, one note is probably the better way to describe them, but not bad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like with it's just apples to oranges, I guess. Like in the original, like 39 episode show with like a lot of more comic sort of 60s drama. Obviously, there's not going to be any characters as memorable as like Mitsuhiro Ide in this film, but for what they were, I thought they did their job. I think like Taminaga was decent. Like even though like I was sort of expecting him to be the kind of like like a nice like Boy Scout that Hayata was, and he absolutely wasn't. He was actually a lot more emotionless in this film. I thought like it kind of works as its own thing with like Ultraman attempting to adjust emotionally to humans and not at this point like not being sure what to think of them, as opposed to just like falling in love with the human race early on. So I think it kind of works, even though he's not as memorable as Hayata. And other characters like like Asami, they were okay. They did their thing.
I think as far as like an Ultraman movie goes, to have one-off characters like this, I feel like they were all pretty memorable. Like they all had character traits that and scenes to them that would stick with you. Like the one girl is the giant scene.
Yeah, like they really stick with you, didn't they?
Yeah, that really stuck with me. And the sniffing scene is just in my head forever.
In my head, yeah. Oh, damn.
But we also, obviously, we've talked a lot about the aliens of the movie, but the kaiju of the movie, I think, as being kind of, like the calm before the storm, as it were, was an interesting approach to take them in, where they were essentially tools planned from the beginning to like demonstrate power. That was
the boil area.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting concept, and obviously tying them back into the fact they all have the same base suits in the original.
That was so cool.
There was a lot of interesting let's take some pre-production factoids from the original show and make them law kind of moments in this.
Like the Shin Gamis thing kind of raises like obviously they use the Shin Godzilla model for that. I mean, I'm assuming that's just like kind of a reference and there's no actual tie to Shin Godzilla at all.
Yeah.
Nah, I thought that's like a comedic reference with obviously the Godzilla suit for Gomez. Thought like I don't think we're going to get many people saying, "Oh my god, Shin Godzilla and the Shin Ultraman are connected to the same Shin Godzilla model." Oh my god.
And there was a lot back when the movie came out in Japan. There was people watching it in Japan saying like, "Oh my god, there's a guy from Shin Godzilla in here," and he's like talking about how Shin Gamis is like Shin Godzilla, and I was like,
"That's just not
doesn't
true."
seem right. So I'm glad that it's not.
Yeah, for real. Like, I think
Like the way they
any
went.
fears that the two would be connected were quenched at the very start of the movie when they did the whole. They essentially like did a screw you in your face to the people who did think that the two
Yeah.
movies were going to be connected right at the very beginning before the film even started.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Shin
I did.
Godzilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did some little research as well, and of course, like it's quite obvious the two aren't connected when you see like Takumi Saito, who played Kaminaga in this film. He played like a tank squadron commander in Shin Godzilla, who was a completely separate character. So like, yeah, if people have any hopes the two are connected, I'm afraid they're going to be disappointed.
Right.
They did.
Yeah, I do like.
They did tease it kind of with the one government official person with the glasses who was in both movies.
Yeah, yeah,
They're just similar characters played by the same person in my eyes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
But yeah,
yeah. But speaking of like pre-production kind of things that turned into law, Sophie's role in the movie like made me internally head explode. Of how they're taking such an obscure facet of Ultraman history on how Sophie was written as a villain in a couple of books in the 60s because of a misprint, and turned that into canon and gave him a design that was replicating the faded pages of the book with the black illustrations. That was
I didn't know about that. That's cool.
yeah, I didn't know that until you told me. Like afterwards, that was done. Yeah.
And other things about it, like how obviously the lack of the color timer with the original vision of the character, how the changing of the red into other colors was meant to be part of the original. I believe I think that's what it was supposed to be. But obviously,
I don't know if the colors were.
The big one is definitely the color timer's gone, which is I honestly didn't mind. That was one of the things that I didn't mind at all. Although it did seem
I think it really helped set apart the design from the original Ultraman.
It did seem
it's a very obvious. You could tell the difference.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, I feel like it just feel like they're supposed to be the same thing. But having the color timer gone really like shows that they're different.
Yeah.
That there's Shin Ultraman and there's Ultraman.
Like the entire like reds turning different colors, it did seem a little bit distracting. Like the first time it happened, but it was quick to get used to. And I also really liked how when he first landed, he starts with the Type A suit head and then changes to Type C later.
I love that.
Yeah, I love how like they actually made that a process of him like adjusting to Earth and that. That was really cool. Yeah.
And like,
personally, with me with Zoffy.
Yeah, go on. Well, I was just going to say. Never mind. Go on.
I mean, like, I wasn't too sure what to think of Zoffy's character at first. Given he like in the span of like a few minutes, he just goes against his word to Ultraman, like because he's just immediately thinks he knows the greater good in terms of like the grand scale of the universe, like preserving the whole universe rather than getting sentimentally attached to like one civilization on a planet. But it's just like immediately after Ultraman attempts to defeat Zeton, Zoffy immediately just sees, oh, you would give your life to these people. Okay, I guess I see now. These people do deserve to be preserved. And then like he leaves them alone. Mm-hmm. But I guess that was just like me just trying to adjust to this film's like fast runtime, because I do kind of get it in retrospect. Like with Ultraman's like cooperation with the humans to create the master plan to defeat Zeton. Like I do get Zoffy's like change of heart at the end now, so I've softened up to his character in this film. I guess I wasn't expecting it like to end as abruptly as it did, I guess. But no, I do like it in much respect.
Yeah, the ending actually. How about our thoughts on the ending? I don't want to like interrupt any thought there, but the thought of the ending there, the way it's just like Ultraman dies and then the guy comes back and it ends. Like, what do we think of that?
Realistically, it didn't need to have like a fluffy ending bit of the characters talking, getting along, or whatever. Like Kaminaga coming back to life as the very end, and then bam, the credits are there. Smash cut to black. I mean, it's unconventional to say the least. but I don't know if he really necessarily needed to go on any longer than it did. Some people would say the movie went on for too long as it was, so maybe having the ending just immediately like slap you in the face, like, yeah, we're done. I think that
honestly,
that's honestly an interesting decision, but one of the better editing decisions I think that was made in the entire piece. But I'll get onto stuff like that when we talk about the visual language of the movie in a bit.
Yeah, honestly, a little bit of clarification I might need on this. Like, so when he awoke in the end, like, so his corpse was missing, like, from the spot where Ultraman accidentally killed him in the fight with Naronga. So in the ending, is that actually like the human himself waking up with Ultraman having now separated from him, or is Ultraman still with him? I didn't really get that.
Ultraman is not with
him. Okay, cool. But yeah, I do think, yeah, just cutting off abruptly, like with a positive, like reawakening. I think I wasn't expecting it, but the film didn't really need it. Like, yeah, like Cedrixar said, like a fluffy, like a few minutes at the end. It done all it needed to do at that point. So yeah, I'm happy to accept that.
Yeah, it felt the way it was done when I first watched it. I'm like, oh, that's it. Like, it felt like something was missing. But yeah, what you said there, it's like they already kind of wrapped it all up. This is just a little bit of an extra.
Yeah, well,
little tidbit.
The movie up to that point had already played with conventions of structure anyway. So not necessarily having a final, let's wrap everything up in a bow and confirm everything's happily ever after ending, honestly befits the kind of movie it's going for. As I thought throughout the entire thing, there was very clear, like, oh, let's make this a bit different than what people are used to. Sort of energy resonating. But sometimes I think that idea was to its detriment. But again, that's something we'll talk about more when we discuss like the visual language of the film. But one thing that I just want to bring this up like as a brief aside, like in terms of ranking it, in terms of like, oh yeah, this is whatever place on my list of favorite Ultraman movies. I honestly don't think this film not really deserves, but can be ranked with the rest of them because it's so fundamentally different from every other Ultraman movie released. It's kind of hard to judge in comparison.
Yeah, because it is absolutely nothing like anything else, because everything else always has to do with something else. It's always like part of another story, or using other characters that have already been established to tell a story. This is like the first time it's like for the first time, these are the characters, I feel like. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the first time it's, like, setting up a whole new thing in a movie.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, like, obviously I'm not a big Godzilla stan, but I have watched a few films. And, like, Shin Godzilla, I thought, like, that, it can't really be fairly ranked with the other films because it's just so stylistically different in terms of its priorities, in terms of character, like, focus and, like, story structure and just, and focus, modernize, like focus on politics, like this film does in a way.
Shin Godzilla still, I feel, isn't as drastically different as Shin Ultraman is. Shin Godzilla still feels like, when I saw that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Godzilla movie. It's still it didn't feel like too different from everything else. Obviously, the style and design and all that.
Like when
priorities were different.
Yeah,
it's so close. To, like. There's still other movies kind of like that didn't feel as different.
Yeah, I guess because Godzilla is just such like a drastically altering franchise throughout the decades. Yeah, I guess like Ultraman has pretty much like remained. It hasn't gone through that many like tonal like shifts throughout its like 55-year like run, or it hasn't had that much different in structure throughout it. So I guess in that case, Shin Ultraman is definitely a much more like diverging path from the franchise. I get that.
Godzilla movies have a long and storied history of constantly rebooting themselves anyway. So having Shin Godzilla be thrown into the mix, it was just kind of, it's like Godzilla 2000 or Godzilla 1984. It's just kind of, we've seen something similar to that before. Plus Godzilla movies, even though, there is continuity and stuff in some of examples, you can pretty much watch any Godzilla movie in any order you want and still get a complete story. But with Ultraman movies, because they're so linked to existing material, it's kind of hard to do so. Like, you can't just watch the X movie without seeing X the series, because you're not going to understand or get it or enjoy it, really, I find.
Wow.
The only,
Yeah.
well, shush. The only, like, real Ultraman movie I'd say is comparable is The Next.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of.
Yeah, I get you on that.
Because that's like a prequel to Nexus, right?
Yeah, it's the start of a new, like, oh, let's reinvent the franchise kind of movie. Obviously, that
Yeah.
went in a slightly, well, I don't know how to say it, but slightly more mature direction, let's say. In comparison to this one, because this film definitely still retained some of that inherent goofiness and cheesiness that the original series had, while also, in terms of like theming, it's all about acceptance and like working together with other people, and coexistence, I feel, was a very prevalent theme in the movie. But politics, in comparison to like Shin Godzilla, sort of sound like a running motif rather than a theme. Like, the film wasn't about, oh, let's make things politically better in the world, or let's take a jab at the political system, like Shin Godzilla was. It's more so just an idea of a lot of the things in the movie revolve around politics. Like, all the aliens try and manipulate the political system. The Land of Light's political system sees Ultraman as an antagonist in the story. The entire, like, main cast comprises of a special government team kind of thing. There's that underlying theme of politics, but it never is brought much into the forefront outside of reasons for why things are happening kind of deal.
Yeah.
Which is something I appreciated, especially in comparison to Shin Godzilla.
Yeah, it would be annoying just to have it the same thing again. But I think, the way you said it, just like it carries on the theme without like shoving it in your face as much. I think that was definitely the best route they could have taken.
Yeah, because with Shin Godzilla, like, with obviously that kind of like comedic sort of thing, is how like the situation of Godzilla is just interchanged throughout so many parties because they don't know how to handle the situation. Whereas in Shin Ultraman, obviously we have like some sort of like more external politicians, but the vast majority of the film just focuses on the Triple SP and like the struggles they face and just their chemistry together in a way. So it feels like more like we're focused on their development as characters in this film. Obviously, like, it feels like a lot more sort of you might say fat is trimmed compared to Shin Godzilla in terms of developing our characters in this film instead of making it like a purely expansive sort of political drama, which is like which neatly fits in with Ultraman's aesthetic, and I'm glad it went that way.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked just then about similarities and differences between Shin Godzilla, and earlier we talked about differences that we liked from things that were the same that we liked compared to the original. But was there anything in the movie that you thought wasn't taken enough from the original? Like, for me, the SSSP in the original series were established to be a full international organization. Like, we see members from other countries come in sometimes as guest roles. There's a constant communication between things. The main headquarters is in Paris. Things like that really get added to the world building. But in this movie, it's just 5 people in the entire world. They have that throwaway line like, "Oh, giant monsters only show up in Japan for some reason," and that's the only mention really of why the SSSP isn't anywhere else. But I feel like it would have made the movie have higher stakes if the entire world was involved.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, like, I do think in this film it does it differently with how like they made the characters sort of like feel more like a bunch of underdogs in a way compared to the SSSP and the original Ultraman, which I guess made for, I don't know, maybe some more different sort of characterization. But Yeah, true. I mean, the world building in this is definitely not as expansive on that in the original, but it didn't bug me too much, to be fair.
I'd say this is kind of an interesting thought. How would having the SSSP be in other places? How would that affect that the bombing of Gabora that the U.S. did? Do you think? Cause I feel like it would kind of that scene would need to be changed. Like maybe it's the U.S. branch of SSSP that takes it out or something, or
I'm not.
tries to take him out.
I don't know if that would be.
Or would they just leave it the same?
I don't know if that necessarily be the case. You just have to change some of the dialogue of the minister over the phone, saying, "Oh, instead of saying, oh, can we purchase some stealth bombers from the U.S. military?" They say, "Oh, can we borrow some of your stealth bombers, U.S. branch of the SSSP?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that would be like a perfect example of like just using it,
Yeah, like
using that concept.
you don't even have to
It's
necessarily.
an easy way to use it.
Yeah, like there's obviously that whole mantra, show, don't tell. But for something like that, you don't need to show the fact that, oh, it's a worldwide organization for that. Having the stealth bombers, like maybe with an SSSP like logo on the wing or whatever, because that's definitely what you'd want on a stealth bomber, right? Just show them flying in, and that proves that, yeah, this is a more international organization than just literally 5 people in the countryside of Japan, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But was there
Right.
any examples similar to that where you think, oh, more could have been taken from the original show?
Um,
Not
I
particularly on
genuinely
my part.
don't know.
Mm. Okay, I guess it's mutually agreed upon. But yeah.
That's kind of that's tough. Nothing really stuck out to me, to be honest.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
let's change the question slightly. Was there any particular character, alien, kaiju, human, that you would have wanted to see instead of one we got, or with the ones we do have?
Not really. I mean, I do think that it was structured right with how like we had like a couple of more kind of insignificant warm up sort of foes, like 2 more like updated sort of more directly engaged rivalries and aliens, like one being more on the political side, one more on the side of direct rivalry with Ultraman, and then the finale with like the ultimate stakes of Ultraman's race was done really well. The only thing I'd probably change is, looking back, I'm not sure. It's just, I guess it must have like just caught me off guard rather than being something I want to actively change, but how like it immediately went in with Naronga's attack and how Ultraman was revealed like absolutely just almost immediately, and yeah, the actual like characterization and reveal of Kaminaga and like, his death towards the end. I don't know, maybe it's just something I'm more comfortable with given my years of watching Ultraman, but I would maybe have preferred to have more characterization like of him before he died and like more like sort of context and build up to the reveal of the Kaiji's presence in Japan. But we're going to absolute all balls to the walls sort of like Kaiju action from the start. It's not terrible.
Yeah, I think it works the way it was, but there was definitely they could have showed Kaminaga before a little more before he actually does die. I when you say if there's like any monsters I wanted to see, I'd probably want to see like Shin versions of all the original Ultraman monsters, but I'm pretty content with what we had. I think if they do a Shin Ultraman 2, going on more the sympathetic route, I think a Shin Sabozu would be a pretty cool addition.
Yeah, I'm just glad they didn't really go with Bemula, like, and they just went through like from like 2 just purely sort of like Earth hailing monsters instead to make it just like nice and simple, while also being really nice like homages as well. Because obviously you get the whole background of Bemula being an escapee from the monster graveyard and stuff, and like just trying to adjust to that, which would have been quite difficult. So yeah, Naronga and Gabora they're really nice and surprising picks, actually, given Bora isn't very reputational in the Ultraman like community. And so I'm glad he was given some spotlight there. And I also love how they gave like probably one. It's quite nice actually, because given how with Gomez they actually directly played like and just kind of made fun of the original sort of like readapted suit thing. But contrast did a complete 180 with Gabora, who was basically the most forgettable opponent from Ultraman, given like his reused like Baragon suit state. And they contrastingly made him like one of the most unique foes in the movie. I absolutely loved that. But yeah. And he was given like the most peculiar, like drastically altered designs as well, with like the drill and everything.
Yeah, there's two like drill things in his back that like split into like two big tails. That was so cool.
Yeah.
The way he was like spinning around in a circle and they were waving all over the place like tentacles. I love that.
Yeah, that was quite weird. But yeah.
Yeah. I did generally appreciate how they weren't going for the really obvious picks with the opponents they could have gone with.
Like Red King and Gamora and all that.
But I'd say that's mainly down to the fact, Ultraman Powered exists and Shinji Higuchi was a monster designer for that show. So I don't think he wanted to like reuse any of his past experiences or also his monster designing co-worker or something Maeda, I think his name was, who also worked on Powered, did the redesign for Shin Godzilla and the redesign for all these Shin kaiju in this. So I don't think they wanted to retread old ground, really, which I appreciate.
Yeah, well, Powered Gabora was, he was my favorite from the Ultraman Powered. So yeah, I'm glad they still stuck to and continue like.
I completely forgot Powered Gabora exists. Oops.
Yeah, when I first saw the trailer and saw Shin Gabora, I'm like, man, that looks like Powered Gabora, and I didn't know there was any like design correlation like with same people making it. So it's kind of funny that they do actually kind of look pretty similar. But I like again like what we said, what they did with Gabora, even though he was already kind of updated to look pretty darn similar to the way he does in Shin Ultraman. I like that they gave him like all this explanation that couldn't be found.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
For real. Now, I don't want to. What did we all think of each of the individual sort of episodes? Like, let's break it up into sort of like a 5-act structure for this movie. We've got the initial kaiju rampage attacks, the Noronga and Gabora. Well, just the Noronga section first, then the Gabora section, then there was Zarab, then there was the Mephiles one, then there was the Zophian Zeton one. Out of all of those, like, what would be a tier list, do we think, for each of those episodes in the movie?
I don't know. I don't know if I could really rank them. I mean, I could definitely say, like, what my favorite fights are.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I did say I really liked the Mephiles story. I think that was probably the best story.
Mm-hmm.
Fight. I feel like story and fight are different, because I really, really liked the Mephiles story. And I liked the fight, but it felt so short. And I really like the Gabora and the Zarab fights, but again, I think the Mephiles story is superior.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the Zeton thing, it doesn't even like feel remotely like any of the other fights or acts as you said in the story. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the best I could do with ranking them.
I'd definitely I'd put the very first section of the movie last in terms of my favorite parts, mainly down to how it was pretty standard fare at that point. Like, it was essentially a military scene from Shin Godzilla with like a standard Ultraman arrival plot. Like, it wasn't anything I hadn't seen before, basically, whereas everything else was a unique take on a past idea. But I think right after that, I'd honestly put the Zeton fight, the Zeton story bit, not necessarily down to the story itself, but in one of my largest or one of my biggest sort of gripes with the movie, completely in parallel to GPTV's take on the scene, I don't necessarily like the idea that how in the original the humans overcoming Zeton on their own showed how much they'd grown throughout the series, showing they didn't necessarily need Ultraman anymore, which acted as a point of him to say, right, well, as well as him being dead, to say, right, I don't need to be here anymore, I can leave. Whereas in this one, once Ultraman's defeated, he just gives the humans essentially the cheat sheets into getting them to destroy Zeton, kind of thing. Which I know that's sort of like the whole idea of cooperation and working together with other people that was present, as I was saying, in the themes. But I do genuinely like the ending of the original series more than I did this movie.
Yeah.
Because it shows the character growth, the character development, whereas in this, they just kind of relied on Ultraman again. Even though they were a bit more active by the end, it was still Kaminaga who gave them the USB drive with all the answers they needed on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the end, like this movie, I feel like the way they did it in here, instead of having the humans like do it on their own, I think it works a little better in here because the conflict was a little more less of like, oh, we need Ultraman, and in this one it's more like we need to work with him. And I feel like getting the stuff from him really kind of solidifies their relationship in the end. Because he felt pretty distant throughout the rest of the movie, but there he was like, I'm directly giving you what you need.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of like a weird relationship between things they decided to flesh out on in this film and things they decided to tread a bit on. Because I'll agree with you, and like in the final fight with Zeto and how they backtracked, like they backpedaled on the whole thing of humanity's independence from Ultraman, whereas he was essential to the humans' victory in this one, therefore not giving them complete independence from him in the end. Whereas, I guess now in retrospect, Mephiles' episode is probably my favorite, given how they actually like fully fleshed out on the potential alien rivalry. Because I guess at that episode 33's time, they weren't too familiar with the whole kind of like they were just getting started with trying to attempt to do like alien like versus the protagonist like rivalry sort of thing. Whereas in retrospect, the one in this felt more akin to like shows that came after Ultraman, like the rivalries between aliens like in Ultra 7 versus Moroboshi, for example. Like the kind of like the dinner scene felt more akin to like scenes from that, like and even like scenes from like I don't know the coffee episode from Ultraman Orb in a way. So it seemed like they were just like using the like material from the franchise that came after the original show to sort of make a more fleshed out version of Mephiles' rivalry with Ultraman. Whereas they didn't seem to do that for the ending with humanity's independence. They decided to kind of like not scrap it, but just like dismiss it at the same time. So yeah.
Now, just in terms of well, an easy one, in fact, because I completely forgot what I was going to say there. The soundtrack. I thought the soundtrack was pretty decent. The updating of Kunio Miyauchi's original scores was very cool. A bit too much in some places. But overall, the score was enjoyable, apart from where Shiro Sagasu was trying very hard to make Persecution of the Masses and Tragedy Who Will Know 2.0 is towards the ending of the movie. I don't think they worked as well and weren't as impactful as those two songs. But as an overall, pretty good soundtrack.
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts on the soundtrack. So for the beginning of the movie, a lot of the time they were using just directly the tracks from original Ultraman, not updated at all, just like these are the tracks from the original show. And I thought they worked in some scenes. There were some scenes like when Naranga is like first going on his rampage. I remember there's like this one specific shot. It's like he's walking away from the camera. There's like all this destroyed like rubble that we're like focused on. I remember that shot specifically, and the music there really heightened it. I like the music in that part. But in some scenes, like when the characters were talking and such, it felt very like not out of place. Well, I sort of out of place and maybe like too loud. It feels like it kind of clashed with the audio quality. Like since it's from the original Ultraman, it's not going to be as like high quality as it is like the audio, everything else. So it worked in some scenes. I feel like when people are talking and something like that, it's like it's a lot more obvious hearing like the difference in quality between them. It was a little distracting. And there was also stuff like Early Morning in Tokyo.
That fucking song again. Yeah.
It didn't work in this movie. It was too loud or something. It was way too distracting. I liked the song, but it didn't work here. And like you said, the updated tracks. I thought the updated tracks were absolutely phenomenal. I wish there was a lot more of them in the movie. They sounded so good. Like updated Ultraman's theme, the one that plays over the Gabora fight. Just chef's kiss.
I was surprised.
Out of Body State.
Yeah,
Out of Body State is my personal favorite track from the movie. It's so good. It's so good. I wish the Mephiles scene was longer because I love that track so much. I wish they used like the full version to go over the whole fight. And then for Original Sin and Is Humanity to Die, I really like them both. I think, at first, when I first heard them, I was like, oh yeah, this is just, typical Evangelion, Shin Godzilla, got the choir, it's all tragic. But after listening to it more and seeing it in the movie, they definitely really, really grew in me. Is Humanity to Die I love that one so much.
There was a missed opportunity to like bring in, Ultraman Naruto in some way. Like even if it was just part of another song, like they intertwined it in a composition for one of the battles music parts. There was ways they could have done it, but that song was just entirely omitted for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I saying I think maybe the new Blu-ray reissues of Ultraman could learn a thing or two from this movie, which insist on just replacing all the nostalgic old like sound effects with like horrendously like mixed, like crisp, like ones that just deafen you, because having not only reutilized the original soundtrack in this, but they actually just used the actual explosion sound effects and roars from the original, and it's just so seamlessly worked, in my opinion, for this film, into like making it like not like almost like unbelievable, but like as a nice homage to the original in a way. It worked so well, and of course, it doesn't go, as you've already said, the original songs. I thought they were utilized like so well, especially I thought like when like I think it's called Monster Appears from the original soundtrack, when that was utilized for like Noronga and his appearance, like god damn, that worked so well. Yeah, and I think I don't know, people have mixed opinions on it, but I think that the song for the ending, it worked well, like for the kind of like quickness, like positive ending that the film had as well. I think because that song has definitely grown on me since. And with the like real kind of like epic sort of like orchestral sort of score, like especially towards the end with Zeton, I thought I thought that definitely worked for that period in the film, and how like it gave a nice kind of contrast to like the nostalgic jazzy sort of obviously reutilized 66 soundtrack like throughout the majority of the film. So yeah, I've got no complaints about the soundtrack.
Fair enough. Now, one of the things that I particularly liked about this movie, I've already told Pester about this when we were coming out of the cinema for it, was how the movie did a very good job of taking some of the more intrinsically campier or cheap aspects of the original production, making jokes out of them in a way, but doing it tastefully. Like, in terms of the stiffness of Ultraman's flight, because obviously he doesn't move in flight in the movie, because he didn't move in flight in the show because it was just a prop, and using that stiffness to great effect with the whole super spin kick Gabora in the face move.
Yes,
things like that.
So
I love how they don't even abandon that flight maneuver, even in like the most dramatic scene ever, when he's trying to like escape that the void that like the attack on Zeton did in the original, and he's literally just like zigzagging like close ups like on the camera while maintaining that stiff light pose. I think I almost laughed, but still it worked, helped bring like cheesy revisit to the original.
That ending though, the way you said he's like zigzagging all over the place, that ending really does kind of feel very it fills you with like existential dread. It's just the way he's zigzagging all over the place so crazily is like he's giving it all he's got, but he's getting sucked in anyway. And the fact that they play it for so long really is like, oh god, just suck him up already. It's gonna happen. He's fighting here.
Yeah, true, I guess. Especially with the soundtrack as well. Good night.
Yes, the soundtrack on that part. Oh my god, that was so good.
Yeah. And, yeah, I also like with like recreating like kind of like stiffness of old suits. I like how like again with direct recreations, like how they basically just like did like a one-to-one recreation of that little bit when the Ronga's sucking up electricity. But obviously he does it with his mouth instead of his horn, but how they still maintain the kind of movement of the suit like in that scene was still pretty nice.
Yeah, for real. But it's that whole thing as well, like there's an inherent cheesiness in this movie as well by the CGI obviously not being 100% all of the time, which was we all expected going in. But
yeah, there really weren't too many moments for the CGI.
There was
the only one I could really think of.
There was one distinct
it's like
moment.
Naranga like thwacking a tower, and like his arm felt like it felt very unmonster like. That was like really the only time I felt like it noticeably didn't look good.
The one moment in terms of CGI that dragged me out of it was after Ultraman does his super spinny kick move of doom on Gabora's face. He flips backwards, does his impact pose on the ground, and as he stands up into his fighting pose, it kind of like jumps between the keyframes. I think that animation felt very unfinished, but it was the only like this is taking me out of the moment experience in the entire movie, really.
So you know what? I'm gonna look at that right now.
So I need a 1 minute. Like I'll be 1 minute. Real quick.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem.
So it is a kick. He lands. Oh, yeah, I kind of see what you mean. And does it freeze or is that just thing I'm playing with? He drops. Yeah, I see what you mean. His arms move weird. Yeah. He's like his leg kind of jitters.
Yeah. In saying that as well, there was one other moment I'm just recalling where it was when he it was in the Zarab fight where he did the judo throw over the shoulder. That honestly, I don't know if it was actually a problem with the animation or not, or just me thinking really weirdly, but it looked exactly like a Fighting Evolution 3 animation. If I'm being honest.
Throws him over his shoulder.
Yeah.
When does it happen? Is it at the beginning or the end?
That's towards it's in the Zarab fight. That's all I really remember.
Is it like Zarab and not
actual Zarab?
Okay. Throws him over his shoulder. Looking through here. It's kind of low quality, so it's a little hard to tell. Oh yeah, when Ultraman like catches up to him and starts like beating him in the sky, that looked a little. I don't know if it looked. I can't tell if it looked good or off. Like, there's a very obviously they're flying, so there's going to be a floatiness to it. Yeah. But when he first catches up to him, it feels very like stiff.
Mm-hmm. I think that was trying to replicate the whole. Oh, in one shot it's puppet, but then we switch to the next shot and it's the suits again, kind of thing. But if they were going for that, I think it really should have been from the wide shots. They're just the stiff flying motions without any movements, and then it cuts to a close-up where they just spontaneously start moving and things. I think that would have been another example of like taking an aspect that's being cheesy from the original and making a joke out of it, but doing so tastefully.
Right.
Yeah.
But since we have an American here in the call, I say that like you're some sort of vile being, but I don't mean it like that.
Oh, yeah. I should be saying that about you.
Non-British being here.
Yeah.
Be gone, Steve.
Now, when at our screening that we went to see, I should also say we went to see the dub, and the dub wasn't that bad. It was
Yeah,
Yeah,
I had to go see
took a
the
while.
subtitles. Actually, I do want to say this about the subtitles, since you guys didn't watch it with that. The subtitles, it was hard watching the movie with subtitles
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
there
it's
is
some
just
pacing
so
on
many
that.
cuts and the dialogue is so fast that it just hurt my eyes trying to. And there was so much dialogue too. There was never like breaks. So it was basically just I was reading and I couldn't really even look at
Yeah,
what was
yeah.
happening.
Like
Yeah, I remember with Shin Godzilla, I watched that film with the Blu-ray, and I remember I had to just rewind and just pause it several times to keep up with what they were saying. So yeah,
And it's on like a big screen, so it's like you can only focus on the words. It's not like when you're looking at a smaller screen, oh, you can see the words and the video because it's like smaller. It was so big, it was like I'm looking at one word at a time. I can't possibly look at anything happening behind it.
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah,
I think because, well, the dub was the only one of the 2 days that me and Pesta could actually go to see it together, which is the main reason why we chose to see that version instead. But considering our knowledge on how Shin Godzilla was very much a technobabble kind of movie a lot of the time, a lot of talking, a lot of character names, a lot of captions, it honestly helped, I think, seeing it dubbed, and it helped that the dub.
Yeah.
It helped that the dub was pretty good. I mean, Freddy Fazbear played Zarab. How friggin' sweet is that?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But anyway,
Honestly, I hadn't seen any
go on.
dubbed films in ages, so like it took a couple of minutes to adjust to it. But yeah, the voice actors did their part, and yeah, I can't complain really. It was a pretty solid dub.
Yeah. But
I wish I watched it, honestly.
yeah, but anyway, back to what I was originally saying. At our British screening of the movie, before the film started, all they had at the front of the movie was the Takumi Saito and the Shinji Higuchi interviews. What I hear there was more things at the front of the American screening. Can you please let us know what they were?
All there was at mine was just Subaru Imagination ads. Or was it Ultraman Connection?
It'll be Connection.
I remember seeing them have the Imagination logo though. But there was like, I don't know, they showed, I think it was Connection stuff. Because they had Sakamoto up there.
Oh. Did you get the pop quiz question? Who directs the Ultra Galaxy Fight series?
They didn't have the quiz show at mine. And I know that was a thing they were doing, but there was no quiz show at mine.
Oh, that's a shame. I would have asked you what some of the questions were. All I know is like the who directed the Galaxy Fight series, and the best answer on that board is Shawn Nichols. It should have been him. But and another one was like, here's a picture of Jack Ultraman reboots and someone else. Which one's the original Ultraman? You know.
Yeah.
That old chestnut.
But all
Ultramen look the same.
That's a little racist.
There's there's one.
People sent pictures of some of the questions.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find that.
Oh, go on then. While they're doing that, I'll just bring up that there's one. We've talked about like the story structure of the movie itself, and how it takes a very episodic approach. But at the same time, it's also a movie. And a movie, there is an expectation that there needs to be some form of continuity from the start of the movie to the end with some form of payoff, which is just what people expect when you're going into a movie experience. So I think in some ways the episodic structure was a bit detrimental on that front because it didn't really go all the way. Like if you want to have like, oh, here's five different bloody episodes stringed together, just do that. But then in the Mephiles part, it's like, oh, here's an explanation from Mephiles on how all of the previous events from before the movie started and how it's connected to here. But it's basically just two throwaway lines like, oh yeah, I was the one who started all this. Like, if you're going to go one way or the other, just go one way or the other. Have the 5-episode structure, or have it a full movie with an overarching story throughout the whole thing, instead of just half dipping in to both of them. You know, I think it would have made the movie a bit more accessible in that way.
Yeah, true. Though I guess in a way you could argue that kind of fits in with the cheesiness or some sort of shower bits where like occasionally you get a story where there is literally just two throwaway lines to like explaining like a long string of events.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that didn't faze me too much to be fair.
Yeah, it didn't really bother me either.
Yeah, fair.
I thought it was just kind of a cool, like, oh, hey, he was behind it the whole time. I guess they could have played it up a little more. Mm-hmm. But it didn't really bother me that it wasn't.
Yeah, I suppose. That's just a little, like, personal grievance, though, with the film that I think could have helped it if it decided on one side or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so in the middle, like, I'd say in the middle isn't too bad, though. Like, I'm not too fussed about it being one way or the other. To be fair, like it is a unique thing, even if it wasn't exactly proper coherent. But
yeah,
whatever.
Now, just linking back slightly to the previous point, obviously we all saw this in the cinema. How did we all feel at the fact that we are watching an Ultraman movie in our home country on a cinema screen? Because I was beyond excited.
If you told 15-year-old me I would be seeing a fucking Ultraman movie, like proper modernized take on it, from fans of the franchise, but like in the UK cinema, like fuck, I would say like, bro, like stop fucking with me. That is not happening. Like it was just a once in a lifetime experience. It was amazing. Like, yeah, it was everything I could have wanted. But like I said, when that first Ultra Q logo showed up on the screen, it felt like being in a dream, man. Oh my god.
That, and we were the only ones in the bloody cinema as well, which was like, oh my god, yes.
Was there one guy at the back, or did that guy not show up?
No. It was just us two in our recliner seats, just watching the movie in an empty screening, which was really
good amount of people.
Yeah, it was.
So there was 2 screenings on Wednesday and then one on Thursday. Wednesday, I remember. Well, I tried to go to the earlier screening on Wednesday, and that didn't work out. But I did notice there was a lot of seats taken on that day. On the second screening I went to, which was like an hour after the other one started, there was still like at least 10 other people in the theater with me and my dad. And then on Thursday, we were looking at tickets for Thursday too, and the whole theater was pretty much booked. So there was a lot of people there. And especially, I'm not exactly in a bigger city, to say the least. So seeing that many people there, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. We had to go like about 2 hours away from our residence in order to see this movie in the cinema, and we had to stay overnight in the city.
Really?
Yeah. Although realistically, looking back, we probably could have got on the train and got home the same night. I mean, it only ended like 9:15 on the evening, didn't it? So, but oh well, we had a good night together anyway, so it was all right. But
decent blast.
Yeah, as I say, it was really brilliant. Not only just seeing like a fantasy evolve on the screen, like as I say, at the very start, by some like voodoo magic, we ended up getting the same screenings as America on the same days, and just the fact it happened at all is something I'm still in disbelief about today. A whole 2 days after it happened, or 1 day after it happened, even. It's probably something that's never going to happen again. Like, the only other tokusatsu movies that we're probably going to see in the cinema screen again are Monsterverse stuff, if they make any more of those. So it was just, I was savouring every single moment. But the fact that there was no one else in the theatre with us was a good thing in some ways, but also a bad thing in others, because obviously you're by yourself. There's more of an exclusive experience to it. You're just there indulging in the movie, and you know there's not going to be any distractions of any kind. There's going to be no like audience reactions or whatever, which I consider like a good thing, especially on a first time viewing of anything. But at the same time, you would honestly hope that more than just you and the person you came with were going to be there, just in terms of like, well, you'd want the movie to succeed, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way you know it's succeeding is if there's more than just you and the person you came with in the screening room. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
it was a bit, a bit disheartening in a way. But then again, it wasn't where we went.
Yeah.
Where we went to see it. It wasn't the biggest city in the country or anything. It wasn't London or anything. So, and it was on the second day as well. We don't know how many people showed up on the first day. So.
Yeah, my initial thing was I had a bit of like initial sort of disappointment, as you said. That's how this probably isn't going to succeed much in the UK. We're the only two people in the whole cinema. But yeah, so when the film started, all that just went out the window, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna enjoy this as much as I can, with no distractions, like great seats, great screen. Oh yeah.
They still had the audacity to
Even
put
if
trailers at the front of our screening.
Did they really?
Yeah.
just some soppy ass romances as well. Get out.
Did they? They might have had trailers in front of mine. I kind of don't remember.
We had to pay a premium to get it because it was a one-time like event thing. So we had to pay like double the price we usually do at that chain of cinemas. And they still had the audacity to put bloody trailers at the front. But we did get the very nice recliner seats with trays and stuff. So who's
shit?
Can't really complain too much, I suppose.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the movie. One of the things that is a very much a standout from the movie itself was its visual language in terms of cinematography, lighting, aesthetics in general. There were some very obvious things like, oh, I get it, Kaminaga's wearing a white shirt and Mephiles is wearing a black shirt, which means that he's the hero and he's the villain. Wowee, I'm smart. But aside from those, like, some very simple visual imagery like that, I'll be honest, cinematography-wise, I do think it went overboard in quite a few instances. Like, yes, there's the whole there's the whole idea of, oh, but it's just Higuchi's visual style, but at the same time, what is the shot where 95% of the screen is someone's back and you see one of the other characters' exposed head in between, the shoulders of one of the characters in the top right corner?
Yeah.
What's that trying to communicate to the audience aside from looking unique?
When I saw that, I thought, okay, the only logical reason, the only real explanation for having like such drastically just confusing cinematography is, I know they're trying to replicate this, like, the styles of Shijoji, I guess, where like in the episodes he did, like Targeted Town, of course, like it's supposed to symbolize, there's someone in the shadows symbolically, like watching and observing and spying on the characters. I don't know, given how like the shots are framed from down below, like in the shadow, under the shadow of a seat, and just barely capturing one of the characters in the view. And I thought because Mephiles obviously coming, maybe this is sort of their attempt to sort of like stylistically symbolize that he's spying on them, and he's foreshadowing his deception in a way. But yeah, obviously, like, you can't replicate Shijoji good in that terms. But I thought that was at least an attempt to do it.
I don't necessarily think it was that. I just think, like, it was in terms of general talking scenes as well. Like, there was just a shot from the knee looking upwards when they were just having a regular conversation. Like, what's that meant to communicate aside from looking pretty?
True. At no point in the film, I guess, there's no real sort of...
Like, what was the point of hiding Hiroko's face from the camera for the first 18 shots she was in, and then just nonchalantly revealing it later? Like, it's not like she was someone we're meant to recognize at that point. I didn't see the reason her face should have been kept hidden.
It was the inner conflict of her character, obviously. Oh. I have no fucking idea.
They didn't show her face at the beginning. It was less of not showing her face, but just showing someone walking into the building and like what they're listening to and what they're seeing, like with the people discussing everything. And it was just like her walking in from the back. They could have shown her face, but I think it was just there was no reason specifically that they were not showing her face other than here's someone walking the building.
Yeah, there was a lot of ambiguity to a lot of the camera positioning. Like some of them looked really, really fucking good. Like in that entire scene where they're talking in like the tunnel or whatever. I think that was the smelling scene. Where all like, no, I don't think it was. Yeah. I think it was the first time they all met up. But it was in the underground tunnel place or whatever. There was a lot of really nice symmetry in the shots, a lot of good leading lines, rule of thirds through the wazoo. But at the same time, there was just some really peculiar angles that I honestly didn't see a reason as to why. Like, they didn't look particularly nice. They were just kind of there.
I appreciated them. There was a lot of them. I think ultimately my issue is the fact of how many there were.
Yeah, there's too much of a good thing sometimes.
Kind of peeking in every once in a while, I'd be fine with it, but it was like every 5 seconds, here's a new angle.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was kind of more...
like the very first...
I think it was also annoying with the subtitles, like I said before.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it would like get a cool angle and stick on it a little longer.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, I mean, it's nice seeing an angle you usually don't get to see in a movie, because a lot of movies cinematography can get pretty stale. So I appreciate all the angles, but it's like a little overboard.
Mm-hmm. Especially, I think it was like right at the very beginning, once the Ultra Q sequence was done, there was in the first minute, like not even that, in the first 30 seconds, there was basically a cut every 1.5 seconds to like a different thing, which was honestly like, I guess it was supposed to be an attention grabber, but there's such a thing as too much, and I do think it did overindulge at some point, and honestly looked a bit. I know this is going to sound like very derogatory to the movie, but from personal experience of where I am, this reminds me of something that I would do in a student project at some points, like, oh, let's just get an angle for this because it will look neat, or let's just get an angle from this side because I feel like it, kind of deal. Like, I don't necessarily think every single shot was thought through as much as others, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, in other aspects, like color grading wise, I liked the colorization of the movie quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I know we're getting into like the minutiae of filmmaking at this point. But it wouldn't be like a film discussion if we didn't discuss all of it, really. So I'm gonna talk about the bloody colors, whether you like it or not. And I thought the colors were very nice. Although I did think at some points it was a bit too muted. It could have. I know it's meant to be like a mature, serious movie with cheesy elements thrown in between. But at some points it could have done with a bit more saturation, perhaps, in the colours departments. Lighting wise was very nice. I have no complaints about the lighting. Even in the nighttime scenes were pretty well lit. I liked the lights coming off of Zarob in all of his appearances, if that counts for anything.
Yeah, I like how they made it more like 4 eyes instead of just like 2 little lights at the side of his suit. Yeah, they kind of, and how his bright blue lights kind of like added more to like the mysterious element in the dark, especially in his first appearance. I love that.
With his baller like PI outfit, like L.A. Noire.
Mm-hmm. Oh, goddamn flashbacks. Zarob, LAPD.
Now, was there any like other technical aspects I thought were very great? I mean, not really. The sound mixing was alright for the dub, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I thought like this, with the colors, I thought like, especially with the fights, with like the bright colors, especially with Ultraman and I know obviously the surrounding greenery with Kabura and Naronga. I thought like it wasn't too saturated, but it was just enough to the point where it felt like a genuine kind of throwback to the original without seeming like too campy in a way. So yeah, I was definitely happy with that. And with Zarob though, I loved how I loved how they retained like the sort of feel of the original fight while still making it feel like a more slicker and much more modernized kind of, like an inequality action film you would see nowadays. But obviously, yeah, with the original elements retained. Yeah, but yeah, I loved how they added to the grandeur of Ultraman as well, especially when he saves Asumi in like from Zara after he like has her in his clutches, and just like yeah, I love how they do that revisited trope with Ultraman with like he saves the human and he just like looks down and just does his like encouraging nod as usual. And but have they retained that old technique that they've done throughout the whole franchise, but it doesn't really need much more modernizing because like every single effect they've tried to do to pull that off in the franchise has worked. But yeah,
I think
exactly like that one.
Elevated the that scene was how she couldn't stand up in the hand because obviously like the way he's up in the air, he's not really very stable. It'd be pretty much impossible to stand up on that. So I thought it was pretty cool. Like wobbling and like trying to get your balance at every second.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in the original, he's oh my god, I'm the worst Ultraman fan. I completely forgot the name of the kid character in the original 1966 show. But obviously, he's holding him up by a rope, so there's no need to like do the whole disbalance thing. But whereas in this, of course, they have to add that kind of realism and adds to the immersion a lot, definitely. But yeah, like I love how they made Ultraman's eyes as well, like as a sort of like the light source, like with the moonlight in the Zara fight as well. That was really nice. Yeah, made him more immersed in the surroundings, you could say. Yeah,
I've just thought of another technical aspect we can discuss: the editing. This relates very much back to the whole like very quick cut sequence they were going for at the start. And also relates to our topic of how it just abruptly ends as soon as the story's over. For the beginning scene, or upon reflection of my comment from about 3 minutes ago, I guess they were trying to go for a whole like, oh, we want to immediately start off because it's in the middle of Noronga's attack kind of deal, or we want to establish a frantic pace or whatever. But I do think that some other particularly more notable things could have been shown in that sequence than just about two or three different close-ups of the SSSP logo from different angles. Or like during the dinner scene when Mephiles flusters Kaminaga towards the end and he puts his cup down. The cup being put down takes up 3 different rotations of the hand, which
I kind of like that.
I don't really think was very necessary. I mean, technically it was impressive. It was technically impressive, especially because it's that idea of everything around the glass is moving except the glass, which was very, very well conveyed on the screen. But again, I'm not entirely sure what they were supposed to mean by that, aside from it looking cool. Like, this is what studying film has done to me. It's made me think too much. I can't just enjoy films anymore. Help.
I think it's fine to just have something. I think it's fine just to have something because it looks cool. I mean, like, obviously there's times where you should have... it's like unnecessary and it can kind of detract from being unnecessary, but I feel like in this case it just I don't know, keeps you focused on it. Like sometimes dialogue can get boring if it's just like here's the people talking, but throwing in little things like that keeps you like, oh hey, that's cool. And then you remember that and you remember the scene.
Yeah, and a little external kind of variety to it like that.
Now does
like that.
I've pretty much run out of topics to discuss right now, apart from one big doozy, which is my controversial take that I mentioned before we started recording. So does anyone have any suggestions of other talking points quickly before we move on to the finale?
Well, I think I covered everything I had to say.
Drop the doozy, man.
Okay. So throughout this entire thing, we have obviously been taking this view and discussing it from the opinion of long-time Ultraman fans. people that this movie is clearly designed for in at least some capacity. But in general, throughout the whole film being judged as it is right now, I honestly do not think this movie should be watched by people who don't know about Ultraman, not necessarily aren't already fans, but don't know the type of movie they're getting into. Because I do not believe this will make you like Ultraman if you know nothing about it already.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, because on most of the review sites I've seen, like especially from like the real reputational places like RogerEbert.com and even IGN to a place, the reviewers for those are like actually long time like Ultraman fans themselves, and the platforms have obviously had to try and find people who are really familiar with the franchise, and obviously it got really positive reviews and thorough reviews there. But to anyone who doesn't know what Ultraman is, I can imagine them being quite alienated by this film in a way, even though you can definitely inspire people to check out the franchise. There are obviously so many elements people might be confused about, I might say. Yeah, I don't suppose it'd be too like much of a rough viewing to unfamiliar people, and I definitely recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not too sure what this film's success will be in the UK and US.
My precedent for saying
like
this sort of thing, my precedent for saying this is because it's tied, so even though it's not tied in universe to, it is linked very heavily in terms of staff, production, tone, storyline aspects to Shin Godzilla, a movie that very much people see as a jumping on point to the Godzilla series. And I see people are going to look at Shin Ultraman and say, oh, this is kind of like Shin Godzilla, so it'll work as a good jumping on point. Where I honestly don't think it is a good jumping on point. Like, as I say, you probably will not, unless you're already familiar with tokusatsu as a concept, or have seen some stuff already from it. This definitely wouldn't be something I'd show to someone to say, hey, this will give you a taste of what Ultraman's like. Plus, considering it's so distinctly different from everything else that's come before it, it definitely wouldn't be something that I'd give to someone who wants to get into the franchise kind of thing. I wouldn't say no. If they really want to see it, that's fine, but it's not necessarily the Ultraman thing I'd say will make you like Ultraman if you don't already like it.
Yeah. I mean, if something's clearly just a pure love letter to the people like who are obviously committed fans to the franchise, where I know you would imagine, like, in order for this to appeal to people, I know the Blu-ray release of this would have to come with a massive blurb on the background, like full caps. Wait before you watch this film. Ensure you watch episodes 1 to 8 of the original series, 6, 7, and 8 of Ultra 7, like 33 and 8 of Return of Ultraman, in order to fully appreciate this film. Yeah. I'm not
honestly trying to come across as some sort of like a gatekeepy little shithead when I say this thing. It's just thinking realistically. Like, this is a film made by fans for fans at the end of the day. And the only reason it really became such a success in Japan was because Ultraman is a cultural icon. And everyone at least knows or has seen a little bit of Ultraman already if you're from Japan. So, but from an American perspective, from a British perspective, from a French perspective, nations that definitely aren't as in tune with this franchise and aren't as well versed in all of the cultural references, because Ultraman's a cultural icon, as I say. He's referenced in all sorts of other media in Japan already. You've been exposed to him already throughout most of your life, probably in some way, if you're from Japan. But if you aren't, it's not going to hit those same bells. And again, it's not something I think is going to make people jump onto the series.
I think the average person might be caught off by it. I feel like at least if someone is more accepting and willing to watch something that's a little different than the average, blockbuster movie. I feel like at least at that point they could still enjoy it. get something out of it.
Plus, this
like,
is a very
if they're okay with seeing something weird.
yeah. Plus, this is a very quintessentially like Japanese-made film. There was a quote from a reviewer that I've forgotten the name of already, even though I saw this yesterday. But they said the film very much. Well, I don't think this was exactly what they said, but the film very much emanates like a Japanese style of filmmaking because American filmmakers wouldn't be courageous enough to make something like this because it's very out there, it's very quirky. Obviously, the structure is different to what a mainstream Western audience is expecting. So if you like that sort of like out there structure, the very like non-standard kind of deal that it's going for, then yeah, sure. And again, if you're already familiar with like Kamen Rider or Super Sentai or Godzilla movies, then you will probably get some enjoyment out of this. But in terms of the movie, like bringing people into the series as a starting point, I don't see it being very successful in that regard.
Yeah. Then again, I imagine from the viewpoint of someone who doesn't know what Ultraman is, seeing this film and watching it all the way through to the end, like just a random assumption, but I think I don't know. I think some people would be more curious, like out of any potential alienation this film might cause, to actually give the franchise a shot.
Yeah.
So
I think it's more risky. It's more risky than anything. I don't think it's gonna be like this wouldn't get people into it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's either gonna make people not like it or people are gonna really like it. I feel like it's more like that.
That's fair. Like, I'm not trying to be a whole, like, nihilist about it, like, oh, Shin Ultraman's not gonna make anyone like it at all. I'm just trying to be as realistic as possible when I say this sort of thing. And considering it has had this, like, global release, and I have seen very much a love-it/hate-it relationship, with the hate-it side coming primarily from people who haven't seen any Ultraman stuff beforehand and always says the first line of their review as someone who was excited to see the first Ultra Series thing, you know. And obviously I haven't looked at every single review for the movie, but from my scourings across the internet, there is that divide between what the fans think and what newcomers who haven't seen anything think. But it's just time will tell is obviously what's going to happen. But from the current standing, again, like this wouldn't be something I recommend as a first Ultraman thing to view. But it's going to probably get that precedent because, it's the same creative team as Shin Godzilla. It's got a similar name to Shin Godzilla. Blah, 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 blah. Everyone says Shin Godzilla is like the best thing since sliced avocado. That sort of deal.
Yeah, exactly. I guess, time will tell definitely because obviously this film is still in a fresh phase and an unpredictable time. So and because it's nice to see what this film would be like in like a year or two.
Because it's been revered so much by fans as well. It's been like, oh, well, the fans really like this, so as a newcomer, I'll probably like this as well. You know, again, just trying to be realistic about the situation. But we shall see in however many years' time if that prediction turns out to be true or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I haven't given it much thought, but I'd like to be positive, like, I don't know, optimistic about it, and at least like a healthy amount of people will be introduced to Ultraman through this. So if anything, it's like the best possible way to get into it with in terms of representing the actual show's like values and the actual style of it. So it gives a pretty raw sort of like this is it sort of view of the original show.
But I don't think an argument could be made that this should be a replacement for the original series.
No, never.
No, of course not, Nothing can fully replicate the original charm of the 60s.
Because it looks similar, but it hardly retains any of the similar story beats.
Nothing can be compared to the original Tsuburaya shows.
Yeah.
Ultra Q, Ultraman, Ultra 7. Those are all like off on their own.
It's just
like when I talk about shows and movies regarding Ultraman that I like, and I say, "Oh, this is my favorite." It's like I'm not even counting those original three because like they beat anything easily because they are.
I mean, because obviously in the 60s, there's obviously like limitations by creativity, whereas with all the resources people have now in terms of CGI and everything, this movie is obviously contrastingly looking to rediscover those like limitations the 60s had in order to it seem like a genuine sort of throwback to those times, like, even though it still has to abide by the modernizations like of films these days. Yeah,
it just so happens like there's a seemingly unfortunate precedent where rebooting of these older tokusatsu media ends up causing the original to not be seen as highly because people are just like, oh, I'll just watch the remake of it,
Right.
which is
No,
something
yeah.
that I don't want to happen in this case, because the original series obviously stands on its own, both in terms of its qualities being different to this movie, but at the same time its weaknesses are also different from this movie. There are things about the original series that are better and things about it that are worse than this movie. There are things about this movie that are worse than the original series but also better than it. It's just a matter of, it's a very good reimagining, but it's not a good replacement because they're so drastically different from each other.
Yeah, it's just like, I was about to say gateway, but obviously, yeah, back to the thing of it's more like a celebration for the fans. But yeah, it's a good gateway, but yeah, no replacement, definitely.
Like, if people, even though I'd still say, like, oh, I want to watch the original series, should I watch the original or Shin Ultraman? I'd still recommend watching the original series over this movie.
Yeah. Because it's one of those... Yeah, I'm usually one with, like, if you watch one thing first to appreciate another better when you first watch it, I'm, like, totally all about that. Like, watch Dyna before you watch Saga kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, like, with the Godzilla thing, like, I definitely haven't seen anyone, like, obviously the reception to Shin Godzilla, I wouldn't say it was as positive as, like, Shin Ultraman, but I haven't seen anyone like that says, "Oh, don't watch the original like Godzilla movie." Like Shin Ultraman has all the themes of that film, but in a modernized take. Everyone I've seen has just pointed to the original. Like, no, it's an absolute cult classic. You must watch this.
Yeah.
So, I can't really imagine anyone saying, "Oh, don't watch the original show." No, I think everyone who acknowledges, like, generally acknowledges the show for what it did, ought to recommend that show as much as the movie. So, yeah. So yeah, I don't think the show's like the original show's like legacy isn't gonna die out any time because of this film.
I'm not saying it will. It's just a matter of this. This shouldn't be the original series taken, I should say, as the original series, the movie, because giving it that title implies, oh yeah, you can just watch this and get all the experiences of the original series, which just isn't true.
So I'll rephrase that, but yeah, it's basically like new sort of Ultraman fans, like that might happen because that might get onto the franchise because of the franchise's increasing popularity to the West. Yeah, like hopefully you might get some people who like just get into it because of this movie, but don't really check out the old material, which is unfortunate. But yeah, again, I can't imagine that will really happen. To be fair, it might, but. Who's to say? Well, just time will tell. Time will tell.
But I think, to bring it back to a more positive, non-controversial take side of things, as I was saying before, this film is by the fans, for the fans, and as fans, especially in my case, as a fan who actively searches out notes on pre-production history and made mental, like, shouts in my head like, oh my god, that's that thing from that thing referencing this thing from the pre-production scrapped designs, or like the that whole deal with Zophie being based on a misprint from some 60s books in this movie made my little geeky little brain explode. But I think even without that very specific niche within a niche, we can all say that the film was indeed very enjoyable, even if it did have some lesser aspects.
Yeah. I mean, I have friends who, like, they hardly know very much about Ultraman. Like, oh, they've just seen the original show. And they absolutely love this movie.
For
so
real,
it's just,
yeah.
like you said, it's just
this goes
make longtime fans like us, like, elevated even more. but
real.
it's still like super really good for just
This film just caused fanboy juice to just flow throughout all my veins, and I absolutely love this film. And I ain't even gonna just bring up the concept of like a score out of 10, because like scores out of 10, like it shouldn't really apply to this, because just like what matters most is just that this did what it had to do, and that was just given a nice modernization of Ultraman, brings me back to those times, and makes me like want to revisit those old shows even more, while still being its own unique movie. And just I couldn't be, honestly, like, apart from a couple of really little things, I couldn't be happier with it.
That's probably what I think too. I again absolutely love this movie. I wouldn't want to rate it out of 10. I haven't even thought about rating it out of 10. Like that never once crossed my mind.
Until now.
I love the movie. That's all that I need to say.
Once again, from a general audience's perspective, I can see it being a bit more squiffy, but I don't care about that because I'm a long-time fan. I absolutely loved this movie from start to end. I did obviously have some flaws that I pointed out through this discussion, but as an overall package, it satisfied a lot of my needs, aside from those few little rough patches within it. And it was the movie of all time, basically.
And it was indeed. Very nice.
Very nice.
So have we covered everything?
That is pretty much all I wanted to talk about, and we've reached a natural conclusion, I find. So thank you to lovely gentlemen for joining me today. Would you like to plug any of your socials, except like you, Pesta, because you don't have any?
Yeah. I'm GPTV on YouTube. The Godzilla one. There's other people named GPTV, but there's, I don't know, mine never comes up. It's always people with like half my subscribers that show up. When YouTube will work itself out at some point. I'll end up back on top again. But
you lovely viewers can look me up as Liquid Pesta on YouTube if you want to see a blank wallpaper of Ultraman Ace meeting Ultraman Z and nothing else. But yes, in the meantime, it was great being here.
Yes, and once again, thank you for indulging me with your thoughts on this very spectacular movie. And I hope to, maybe do something with my life eventually. I just really want to succeed at something, you know? Do you ever get that feeling where you're just like not succeeding in life? Because that's me 24/7. Like, I don't really understand what's going on within my head sometimes.